Hello, welcome back to another episode of Adulting But Not Really. I know that I haven't really been the best at keeping up, but let me defend myself for a minute, and then we can go back to the whole point that I actually haven't uploaded in like 2-3 weeks. I filmed a vlog. It was like a 3-day day in my life in London vlog. It was so good. I put so much effort into filming it. I filmed everything. You could really see how hectic my routine was and how much I do with my day and like what my day looks like in London. And I still have this video saved just because hopefully one day they'll just work and I can edit them. But plus it's a really good, the whole reason why I wanted to do the vlog was because I have a month left living in London and I really wanted to have, my day-to-day life filmed and footage so I can look back on it in a couple of months when I'm feeling a little bit homesick with London and like, oh, I miss it. Because I already had to say yesterday I had a call with the landlord in Madrid and I had to be like, yeah, I studied in London, and that just hurt. That hurt my soul. The minute that I had to say like, yeah, I used to live in London, I still do, but for another month I was like, oh, like that hurts. Like that, I can't believe I'm starting to have to rephrase it as past tense. Crazy. Anyways, back to the whole point. Yeah, and then those videos wouldn't upload to my computer, and then my iMovie crashed, and then I decided, you know what, I'm going to stop using iMovie because I already hated it in the first place, and I used to have Final Cut Pro, but it was like my dad's company's account, and then they had to get it back, so I couldn't have it anymore. I finished the system for a couple of years though, and then I found out about another editing program, and I had to learn how to use that one completely all over again, and that was a whole moment in itself, because if the blog would have actually worked, you would have seen that my days are actually packed, and I have uni, I have work, I have gym, I have assignments, I have moving out things that I need to do every single day. I'm getting rid of a lot of stuff, I'm selling a lot of stuff, so I'm going back and forth between the post office and me. So a lot of things have been happening in my life, so it's a very hectic lifestyle. I actually had to skip the gym to film this today, so there's that. But yeah, so that's my little moment of defending myself. But apart from that, I'm back. I'm ready to give it all. I'm ready to really put my focus on this. I'm ready to get back into it because I generally missed it. And talking about routines and talking about how much I do and talking about everything that I've been overwhelmed with, I realized how much I like to talk about it. And I was listening to this podcast the other day talking about high-functioning codependency. And also living with a purpose and that obsession with always having a goal or purpose in mind when it comes to everything in our lives. And I felt way too identified, and I didn't even notice how much I do this on a day-to-day basis and how much I even talk about it. All I do is talk about how much I have to do. All I do is talk about how my routine is so packed and there's so much to do, and I'm always on a run and I'm always on a rush. And then I remember one day they canceled work for me, and I also class, for some reason, like one class was canceled, and I generally sat in my bed and I started getting anxiety over the fact that I had nothing to do. And I was like, I was counting on this. I was counting on having a routine today. I was counting on being super busy. Yes, I was dreading it, but at the same time, it gave me purpose. It gave me drive. It gave me something to do with my day. And when I went to sleep at night, I was exhausted, but it was because I'd done something with my day, because there was a purpose to my day. And the minute that I had nothing to do, I was just sitting in my bed and I was like, what am I supposed to do with my day now? What am I supposed to do? How am I going to feel fulfilled today? I'll go to the gym, but after the gym, I still have so many hours left of my day where I'm not feeling productive. And then I realized that I had this obsession with being productive, this obsession with having a purpose to my day, or even a purpose in life. I realized that when it comes now to my career, I try to always look for a purpose within that. I try to is my job good enough, and does it give me a purpose in life, and is it working towards my goals? And that is amazing that I'm putting so much work and effort into building a career that makes me happy and something that I'm passionate about. But at the same time, I was also listening to another podcast, and they were discussing, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I've also been reading a lot of very interesting books about philosophy and relationships with people, and it's made me a little bit messed up, I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of feeling, I don't know why I keep reading very depressive books and it makes me think very negative thoughts about humanity, and I really need to read a Happy Sunshine and Rainbows book because it's really getting to me. back to the whole point. The podcast episode kind of revolved around purpose anxiety and how I always needed to have something, and then they talked about how it's okay to not have a job that generally correlates to your hobby or to your passionate life, that sometimes your passionate life is not supposed to be what makes you money. It's not supposed to be your source of revenue. It's not supposed to be your 9 to 5, and that is perfectly healthy, and that is not an unsuccessful life, quote unquote. You don't always have to be doing something just because it is a hobby or a purpose. You don't always have to turn your hobby into a form of revenue. I feel like nowadays a lot of people are aiming to make their hobbies their form of revenue, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong. It is amazing that something that makes you happy and thrills you and excites you is the way that you make a living, because it does make your job more fun and it does make it enjoyable, and then you tend to put more effort into it, and I do envy the people that get to do that. But at the same time, there's really nothing wrong with keeping a hobby, and at the end of the day, hobbies are supposed to be hobbies. They're not supposed to be work. They're supposed to be something that you enjoy on the side. They're supposed to be a creative outlet. They're supposed to be something that relaxes you, something that makes you happy, something that you look forward to. And I realized that I've been so stressed over the fact that I need a purpose in life. I need a career that makes me really happy and passionate, and I wake up every single morning and I'm like, yes. I mean, obviously I don't want a job that I'm dreading every single day of my life. I don't want to be unhappy. But at the same time, I've realized that there really isn't anything wrong with me having a hobby on the side, with me having painting on the side. I've never really wanted to be a painter, but that's a creative outlet that I like to do a lot. I like to paint. I like to read. I like the podcast. There's so many other creative outlets like photography that I don't really ever see as a form of revenue, but I see it as something that makes me happy, that brings me, I guess we could argue, purpose. It does brings me purpose into my day-to-day life. It brings me something to do during my weekends and during my time off, quote-unquote off. And it makes me excited. It makes me think. It makes me reflect. I think I'm a very... I've talked about this in the solo blog, but when I was in Portugal, I was also listening to another podcast about highly emotionally not emotionally intelligent, but like emotional people. People who are very emotional tend to be very creative. They tend to express a lot of their emotions through creative outlets, and they need that creative outlet to be able to let those out and regulate their emotions, because we have a wider palette of emotions. And I realized that, one, I am an emotional person, and I have been knowing this for a very long time. I feel things very intensely. I could argue that I've become very emotionally intelligent over the past few years. I've worked through it with therapy. I've worked with it myself. I've done a lot of reflect and journaling and a lot of healing within myself. So I tend to be really good at identifying my emotions and realizing why they're there and what triggered them and how can I regulate them without letting them out too intensely to the people around me, and also deal with them in a mature way, and also not let my emotions drive me. But back to the whole point, I was listening to how we need a creative outlet, and it just made a lot of sense, because my entire life I've always been a very creative person. It started with the DIYs, it started with my YouTube videos, then it went on to the podcast, then it went on to painting, it went on to songwriting when I was little, which my parents still don't know about. It went through so many different outlets, I was always such a creative person, and I always thought that was just a little me thing, but I've realized that it generally is how I express my emotions. Even to this day, my love language is words of affirmation, so I tend to write a lot of random love letters, not because it's a personal occasion, but because I generally sit at night and I'm like, I'm feeling so much and I want to write it all down, and then I write a really nice letter and I'm like, wow, that felt good. There was no purpose to it. It's just I really wanted to write, and that's just what happened that day. Or sometimes I really like to paint things for people, and I'm like, wow, like it just happened. Like I felt like putting my emotions down on paper, in a different creative outlet. And it's very interesting how when you start learning about yourself and the way you work and why you work a certain way, you tend to learn how you portray your emotions to the people around you, your family, your friends, your partners. And it's very, very, very interesting to realize and also learn, because it's good to know what your love language is. It's good to know how you treat why you express people in a certain way. Also really good to understand how your emotions work and how we can regulate them. And I generally think emotional intelligence is something that everyone should really work towards in their 20s or even before, even during high school. A lot of people tend to get into really toxic relationships, toxic friendships, because they really don't know how to regulate their emotions, and they don't really understand why those emotions are there. Most of the time it's the first time you feel those emotions, so you really can identify them very well. I think I just went through a whole tangent, but back to the whole point. I've been listening to all these podcasts, and anyways, I realized that I'm a very creative person. And then back to the whole point with hobbies. I realized that there were a few times that I tried to make money off of those creativeness. I tried to sell maybe a painting once. I think I did for like $5. And there were so many times that I tried selling a photograph or something, and I actually think I did once. But I was super little, super cheap. I also did a photo